Well, on a chilly morning on January 11th, my father's birthday, happy birthday, Daddy, I am finally off to travel west to reconnect with my inner child, work on some personal artwork, and gather inspiration to share ideas for artful solutions to RV and tiny space living. My friend Teresa Carrata is joining me for this first week to our ultimate destination, which is Craft Napa, to take a class in encaustic waxwork. We were headed down a very gusty I-25, and of course, a snafu on the very first day. Somehow I lost my awning. It tore off, and I would imagine is currently lying in a ditch somewhere along I-25. So here I am at our first stop at an RV park just down the street from Meow Wolf, me and my awning arm in hand. Well, nothing I can do about it now, and everything on the inside is still up and where it's supposed to be, so we're off to Meow Wolf for an artful experience. For a little 5-minute showing of the exhibit, please visit the video I posted just a few days ago that starts off this series, Annie Get Your Fun. Very cold night and morning when we got back on the road, headed west on I-40, aside the trains and coming up the snowy mountains and textured landscape to Arizona, where we're going to stop for the night at Black Bart's RV Park and Steakhouse in Flagstaff. Lots of snow. But look, we're staying on Annie Oakley Lane. Is that not a perfect stop for this Annie Get Your Fun series? I guess it was meant to be that we stopped here. I would definitely recommend this RV park for sure. It's very, very nice people, and they have music every night put on by the super talented college kids from just down the street. We had a fantastic steak dinner and great drinks and took in the feeling of being in this quaint old style saloon. The next morning, the sun was shining and it guided us out of these snowy roads and into California, where the landscape changed again to reveal layers of mountains and hilly rock canyons, which made the road trip much more interesting. Of course, over the border, we fell into the high Sahara oasis pit stop trap. In the middle of nowhere, it looked like this oasis in the desert, but we got stuck paying $5.75 per gallon. It was a strange place, presenting itself like a mirage in the middle of the desert. It had waterfalls and palm trees and places to sit and eat. But heads up, weary travelers, get gas before you get right there into California, because there's not service for another 55 miles. Live and learn, I guess, right? More to drive, where we stopped at my very first Harvest Host experience, a free night stay at Peggy Sue's Diner in Yermo, California. I definitely recommend staying here for a night if you're traveling this way. Yummy diner food, a five and dime, a dinosaur park, and there's so much to see inside this little place, this 50s little joint. Pictures everywhere and great food. We got milkshakes and french fries. Next morning, we woke up to a classic diner breakfast experience. Got on the road for another very windy drive through the turbines and green rolling hills of California, through Bakersfield and over a beautiful pass on Highway 152. And finally, to end up at my good friend Mary Kay's house in Sunnyvale. She is the hostess with the mostest. She ordered pizza, we got to take showers, and we got to work and play with some artwork for a couple days while we rested up and got ready to head to Napa Valley for Craft Napa. So thankful to you, Mary Kay. Thank you so much for letting us vagabond in front of your house. We had the best time. Thursday morning, it blew like crazy and the trees thrashed against the Airstream, and it rained for most of the journey up to Napa. It was about a 2-hour drive in that rain, but we got through it, and alas, the sun came out and showed the Napa sign, and we are staying here at the Skyline Wilderness Park in Napa Valley. It is absolutely a beautiful place to stay. Full hookups, so we're good to go there. There are 25 miles of hiking and there's horseback riding, and it just feels so good to know that I won't be driving for a couple days. The first morning we woke up we were treated just mist in the foggy hills and gnarly old trees, really interesting landscape here. We went to the Blue Note that night. Walked the city and drank wine, lots of wine. And here we are at the crew tasting room. Now for the handcrafted art piece in this video that I'd like to share with you, the Lil Airstream. This is a 6-inch piece, so it's great because it can fit anywhere you want to in your trailer. And you can even use it as a coaster as well. You know, you don't have to hang it up. Where I keep mine is hanging up on the whiteboard. I actually put little magnets on the back. I do have, right now with me on this trip, I have 5 kits that I'll put on my Etsy store at AnnMyhreDesigns. And you can grab one and I'll just mail it to you where I'm from. And then when I get home in March, I'll make some more. So if you're seeing this after I sell out of the kits, just hit me up through email, nittycat@comcast.net, and I will make one specifically for you and I'll alert you when they're back up online. So you basically just need a few fabrics, you know, sky color, background tree color, the foreground. This is actually the material from the tire covers that I use when I'm stationary. I've got rubber gasket. I've got a bunch of rivets from that I picked up from the Airstream floor, and I bet you probably have, if you're an Airstreamer, you probably have a little couple of these little rivet heads hanging about as well. And so yeah, I'll just get started. We're going to work the background first, and then as I work each material, I'll tell you just what it is that I use so you know, and just a few scatterings of beads for the flower centers. But of course, this is all just optional. You know, this is just a fun way to use up some things that you might have lying around. So let's get started with the background. So the goal is to have a 6-inch square when you're done. And what I have here is the foreground measures 6 inches by 3.5. So if you cut your foreground 6 by 3.5, that's that. These two, this is what I wanted to have for the sky and the background of the trees. So this piece, they're both 6 inches wide. This piece measures 1 inch at the shortest end to 2 inches. And then the sky, same thing. This is 1 inch, looks like 1.25 inches and 2 inches. This will all measure up, and when you sew it together, it'll be a 6-inch square. So the first thing we're going to do is just match up the raw edges, put the right sides together, just fold it under just like I did. And you're going to work a very little running stitch 1/4 inch away. And then you're going to do the same thing here. So I just chose a green thread and a regular sewing needle. And I'm going to make a quilter's knot, which is where you take your needle and the other end of the thread and wrap it around 1, 2, 3. Hold the knot in your finger and then just pull the needle through. And then you've got a little knot there. Okay, so when we go here, and you can pin it at this end if you want to. It's a small piece, so I don't even really bother, honestly. And then 1/4 inch, and you can just sort of eye this up. Just start stitching. Probably pick up maybe 3 stitches. You see how little I'm doing this. This is probably a 1/16 inch, I'd say. And just make sure you're keeping your needle parallel with the raw edges. And just 1/4 inch away, and just check yourself. So when you're done stitching those two pieces together, this is what the back looks like. Press the seams towards that middle piece so that it looks like these trees are sort of popping up from the fabric. So this will measure around 6 inches. You know, this is just a fun little art piece. It doesn't have to be perfect. In fact, it's better if it isn't, you know. It's just a whimsy little piece. We don't want to overwork it. If it comes out a little wonky or lopsided, just trim it up. You know, you can cut off, like I think right here I might have to cut off just like that little piece there, and maybe here. No biggie. And then you'll have in your kit a little black strip of fabric, which is 6 inches by 1/2 inch, and 1/2 inch down from the horizon line, we'll stitch that on. So just pin that in place in the one end. And then what I have here is a size 8 pearl cotton in white. Make a little knot on the end of that. And I'm just going to right down the center make a running stitch so it looks like a highway. And you could do this in yellow too. You know, we're just going for a little highway here. So about 1/8 of an inch in, 1/8 of an inch out, 1/8 of an inch in, 1/8 of an inch out. Okay, all the way down. I didn't even stitch the ends of it. Once your highway's on there, you can use what's left of the white. And then just work a chain stitch for some wispy clouds. And so all you do here is you just come up, come back down into just about the same spot. Pick up a piece of fabric. Make sure that your needle's over the thread. Pull slow so that doesn't happen. And then it makes a little loop, a little chain stitch. So we'll go in. Okay, and then maybe I'll make 4 and then start another row of chain stitch on top of it so that it looks just like wispy little clouds. You know, here's one where I did 1 chain and then 3 chain stitches right on top of each other. Maybe I could even work another one so it looks more rounded here. Okay, so there's my wispy little clouds. And then to make the effect of the tree line not being just such a straight line, you have in your kit, or you can cut some little pine tree shapes and just have the top of them sticking up and above the treetop line. Don't spread them so evenly apart, just enough so that you're kind of getting this jagged view. See, just a little bit will make a difference. And then to keep them on there, just thread a length of green thread and just very quickly stitch just down the center. Do a little running stitch because we're going to embroider a whole bunch of trees in the background. So just to tack it in place, you're not going to see this thread. It just comes straight down the middle. Okay, on all of these pieces. So once you get the base of your little trees on, before we do the fishbone stitch on these, what we're going to do is just run a little satin stitch up and down to sort of give the effect of tree trunks, or maybe a dirt hill going up to the trees. So you take 3 strands of DMC floss. I've got kind of an olivey brown color. And then keep in mind too that around the edges, about 1/4 of an inch, we're going to take that backing material and fold it over so all these edge will be covered by the background fabric, which is the tire cover. So just start working in about 1/4 of an inch from the side there and just run a stitch, sort of these vertical up and down satin stitches, and they don't have to be touching always. I mean, let some of the background show through. We're going to go long and short. Remember, we're just giving the effect of a shadow. So I'm just going to insert it right next to that stitch and then just come out the tree line again. The base of the tree line, I should say. Okay, so that one's lying right next to it. So this one I got a little bit of a space here, so just sort of work as perpendicular to the tree line as you can. Just running your little dark trunks and a little dirt hill going up. And then here, just make sure that you're not pulling too much, just enough so that the stitch rests on the fabric. You may even want to pull it apart a little bit just to make sure. So you're going to run that stitch all the way across here. and then we'll come back with the multicolor thread and do the fishbone stitch on the trees. Okay, and so now you've got this little dark bottom part of the tree line. So to work the fishbone, what you're going to do, let's start on this little tree here, is come up, not at the tip, but maybe 1/4 of an inch away from the tip of the tree. And what I have is a size 8 pearl cotton, multicolor, yellow and green. With this one, I did more rusts and browns and greens, so that looks more like fall foliage. But here, maybe we're in Colorado this time, so we're going to use the aspen leaves. Okay, and then go down right at the point of the tree, pick up a stitch, just a tiny little stitch, maybe a 1/16 of an inch. And when you pull it, just make sure that lies straight. And then right into the bottom, just under that stitch that you came up in, insert the needle right down into it. It's kind of in that center stitching line that you did. And then come up on this side of that first center line on the outside of that tree. And then bring it down, and then under this spoke, insert the needle still into the center. So you're kind of looking for that stitching line. And then come up at the edge of the tree just under this stitch. And so this is how you would work the fishbone stitch, just alternating sides. Don't pull too tight. We're not on a hoop here, so we've got really loose fabric. This is just to be worked really lightly. All right, so you get the idea. And then down, and then just follow the edges. And when you get down here, same, just follow the edge, and it'll look like a little tree. So do that for all 5 of these, and then you can work the fishbone just free form in throughout the piece. So like here's a little one in between. You know, just work as much as you can until you hit that dark tree line that you stitched on. Here's a couple more. And just intersperse them through and in between these bigger trees that you've done. Okay, so here are my background trees. And I think the secret to doing this, to just kind of make it look sort of random, it doesn't distract your eye, but it definitely catches your eye, is doing these trees in different sizes. So you see I've got my big trees where my fabrics were, and then I would just make like a little half one here and just sneak in. Like, see, this one's so little, it's just got 3 little beginning pieces of the fishbone. You'll have a nice little grouping of trees. We're definitely Bob Rossing this, so there's no real right or wrong. It's the same stitch over and over again, just by using the thread and the sizing strategically. So in the background here, we're going to just do tiny little flowers. And so what I have threaded is 3 strands of DMC floss in a multicolor pink, and I'm just going to work some French knots in this background, and so it'll kind of look like this. Here's where these little flowers are. Okay, so to do that, I know that I do this all the time in my videos, but I'll show you on this one real quick, is I've got my thread coming out from the background, and I'm going to take my needle and just spin it 1, 2, 3, 4 times, take the thread that I'm holding under the needle, and then put the needle right back in to where you're coming out, or really close to where you're coming out. Keep this taut, the other end of the thread, and just slowly pull it, and then you'll have these perfect little knots. And from a distance, they just look little scattering of flowers, wildflowers along the side of the road. Okay, and so for the foreground flowers, basically we're just going to use 4 different fabrics and cut circles and spirals and clusters. So in your kit, you'll have 4 fabrics. They don't look like this, they're a little different, but they're the same ones that are in this piece that I made. And we're going to cut just 5 to 7 clusters out of one. You'll find one that's got circles on it, cut 7 circles out of that. this one that's more of a sort of a solid color, cut little star shapes like this, little starfish shapes, and then the ones that have a cluster of flowers, just cut a 1-inch circle and then cut a spiral. And then you'll cut out the little inner part of the circle. So once you cut all of your shapes out, you'll have, 5 to 7 of each little shape. I've got the stars here, some various size circles, the spirals that I cut, and then these flower little shapes, little motifs that I cut. So in order to make them stick out even further is in your kit you'll find that I put some wool felt. So if you cut circles about like a nickel size and just put it in the background, that will even pop these flowers out more. So I'm just gonna use sort of a light colored thread and tie a knot in the end, and then just make some stitches that sort of match or coordinate with what's going on in the fabric. I've got these little pink lines that are coming up, so I'm just going to throw some pink threads, and I'll probably do these as well. You don't have to worry about getting everything perfectly stitched down because this is supposed to just be a wildflower bunch. So we're not really going for perfection as always. You can see here like these flowers are just popping right up off. We've got raw edges everywhere, and I think that just adds to the whimsy of the piece. So definitely not going for perfect applique here. And then we're going to do some embroidery on top of the flowers. So just keep it loose and don't spend too much time on each one. Just sort of tack them down. Okay, so as you can see, I just did straight stab stitches where all these little pink flowers are. Here was the first cluster of flowers that I did in this piece, and I just took some green and worked stems. So doing some decorative stitches while you sew them on will save some time. The next thing that I'm going to put on are the little circles, and I've got some leftover wool felt, so I'm just going to pop that behind. And then I think on here I'm just going to run a blanket stitch. So what that looks like is you're going to come up from the back of your fabric. I have 3 strands of DMC floss. And if you lay the thread on the edge of this circle, about 1/8 of an inch over and down, pierce the applique into the back, and then come out towards the edge there. Make sure that the needle's over the thread. And that locks that in place. So again, and as you can see, I'm using a completely contrasting thread. You don't have to always match the thread. I don't have any purple in my fabric, and I wanted some purple in my wildflower field, so we used that thread to pop even some more color in there. Okay, so here's what it looks like with all the little circles, and then the back, and that's enough of the felt to make these flowers puff up a little bit. So next thing what I'm going to do with these little spirals is just fill in these little gaps. So we have the spirals and the stars left. And I'm going to curl this around and just stitch it as I go. So I've got a size 8 pearl cotton threaded, just come up through the back. And you can do a couple of different things here. You can almost do a blanket stitch like we did on these circles. You can go over it, go stab under it and then just put little bars across here. I think this time what I want to do is a running stitch, and that way I can gather the spiral as I want to. In other words, I can push this up and make some of these stick out. See that? And then again, remember, we're gonna, the 1/4 inch around here, don't worry about filling in because we're gonna put our background fabric on that to create the frame. Right, so I think I'll use that little pleat, stab in here. And just spiral this around and fill in these gaps. So this creates a ruffle and a spiral. Getting next level. Okay, going in. I think I cut maybe 7, 8 of these spirals, just enough to fill in the gaps and make it look like more little flowers. Okay, so this is what it looks like with all the little ruffled spirals sort of filling in the spaces. And the last thing I'm going to do are these little stars that I cut out. So just placing them, you can tuck one of the arms under the ruffle, just sort of tuck it in and fit it in. And then I've got 2 strands of DMC floss here. I think what I'm going to do is just sew this on through the center and maybe pop one of these circles that I cut out of the spiral before, just for extra color, and just reach across and stitch it through the center. And then in your kit, you also got a little handful of beads. So what I'm going to do is just put a bead up through the center. And I know this is a 5-star flower, so just come across where you think it makes sense. We can actually just come across and poke it right there in that arm. Remember, this is the sort of I know it's the foreground flowers, but it's really just backdrop for the most important piece, your little trailer. So we're not going to go totally crazy being perfect with these flowers. We want them to be wild flowers. Okay, so I'm going to come right up through the center, pop on a bead, and then just hold those all in place. And then in the center of these circles too, you can put on a bead. And then if you want to, you can work beads in the background, you can work some extra stitching, whatever it is that you want to do to make your wildflowers even more wild, go for it. All right, so I am pretty satisfied with the wildflower field foreground. So now it's time for the main event, the Airstream. Or if you have a trailer that you want to put on, just use different, rectangles of fabric and create your little trailer that you can put on this highway. The other thing that you could do is you could go into a quilt shop, and they have now really super cute RV trailer fabric. This particular one my friend Mary Kay gave me. Thank you, Mary Kay. I love it. This is a little bigger, so if you were going to do that, you'd make this piece just bigger, just for the scale of it. But they also have fabrics that have different sizes. Some are smaller, some are really big. So check that out. That's a really fun thing to do. But for the Airstream, before I put this on, I'm going to put the door and the windows on. So I'm going to cut a tiny little rectangle of fabric and stitch it on, and then these 2 little windows. Cut it so it's rounded at the top. And then I'm going to cut 2 little windows. So before I stitch the Airstream onto the piece, I'm going to use just white sewing thread and a running stitch to stitch these on. But the door will go on this side, and then the windows I just popped in the middle. Okay, so once you have your door and your windows on, you can place the Airstream in the street. So just to add a little bit more interest, don't put it smack dab in the middle, put it off to the side a little bit. Have it placed so that the trailer is just below this far side of the street. We want to make sure the tire's fitting on the road. And you're going to just take regular sewing thread. I'm just going to use the same white thread that I sewed the doors and windows on. And then just begin to stitch it on with a running stitch. Just tiny little stitches. You shouldn't be able to even see them really. And you can pin it in place if you're worried it's going to get wonky. But just stitch it on just like this. You can do a blanket stitch if you want it to be decorative. If you stitch it all the way around and just along the bottom, that should be good enough to hold that in place. Okay, so now the trailer is stitched on and we've got to do the tire. So if you're getting a kit from me, your little piece right here is actually something that I collected off the Airstream floor when I visited back 2 years ago when we did a Lumapalooza, which was super fun. Highly recommend that. I learned so much about the trailer and made such good friends along the way. So, but I don't have that with me, and for the sample, I just had to find this little silver, kind of I don't even know what it is, a washer of some sort. I was lucky to have it in my beads. So it was the perfect size. Your rivet head in your kit won't have this hole, so you could glue it on first and then take like silver thread and just run over it like I did here. But in this case, because I've got a hole in the center, I'm just going to stitch over it. Just sort of put it up so that the center of it, or the top of it, matches up with the wheel well, and then stitch that on, probably in 6 places or so. And then once that's stitched on, take black sewing thread and the washer that you have in your kit and just put it right over that and then stitch it around, every 1/8 of an inch or so, like that, so that you'll have your tire on. Okay, so this is what it's going to look like with everything on there, and it is maximum adorableness. So now we have to finish it off. This is a tire protector cover that I only have a single axle Airstream, so I bought a set of 4 and I had these 2 extras, so I'm using this as fabric. So in your kit, you'll have this square. You're going to want to put it wrong side up and then center your art piece on top of the wrong side with the right side up facing. And then essentially you're just going to fold the top and bottom edge so that the raw edge meets the raw edge of the piece, and then fold it over again. And I would say in this case, go ahead and pin this one side here. And then starting at the opposite side of your pin, just stitch it in place. Pick up a little piece of the background and then come up through the folded edge of that tire cover of your frame. So just down and then up through the folded edge. Okay, stitch it all the way across, then repeat for the bottom, right? And then the sides, same thing. So you'll have a little bit extra fold here. you would just fold it and fold it again, and then stitch the corners down really tight. And why, yes, I did go straight back to crew and snuggled up with my good friend and a glass of wine to finish stitching my little Airstream. We've had such a great time catching up with friends and being inspired at Craft Napa. Check back in next Sunday the 26th, where I'll show you how to go from these yarn spools and toilet paper rolls to this colorful pod system where I'll keep bits of yarns and threads to use in my artwork. I have no idea where I'll be then, but I do plan on winery hopping and eventually traveling to Mendocino, as my friend Alex says it is non-negotiable. I must go. Thank you for following along with me and supporting my art making journey through the Great West and through my Etsy shop, where you can find kits to go along with these videos. Happy trails and happy stitching!